Hello and welcome to Modern Web. Today's episode, State of Services, where we were going to be talking about really services in general, the state of service, developers, driving services, everyday things that developers and that general people are using for services. Today is going to be sponsored by This.Labs. And of course, James, I want to turn it over to you and let you.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Commerce Tools is a proud sponsor of This.Labs and Modern Web and meetups across the area. And we're just calling out that we are constantly in a state of hiring, especially tech people. So we're calling all front-end developers, engineers, DevOps, programmers. If you have those tech skills, we really need you on our team. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks. I feel like we're all in a perpetual state of hiring these days. I don't know how to, maybe services could resolve that for us, but I guess we'll find out. Well, maybe that can be our first topic. So a couple announcements and then we will dive right in. We have a state of headless CMS, March 16th at 9 a.m. Join us back here for Modern Web, where we're going to talk basically the newest, shiniest kid on the block, headless CMS. We have, I think, all started to use them and started to reap the benefits, especially everybody here in the sort of services layer. And we're going to dive into like WordPress as a monolith and headless CMS and sort of the benefits and like what and why you would pick one and why you might not pick one. I am your host, Jesse Tomchak. Tracy's always here, sort of lurking in the background. She might pop in. She is wanted everywhere. She's way more popular than I am. So I'm going to try and curate this great group of people, of panelists. We've got Lee, Solutions Architects with Vercel. How are you doing? Do a little emoji hand waves.
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. We've got Chris, Senior Developer Advocate for DigitalOcean.
Hey, everybody.
We've got other Chris, Senior Cloud Developer Advocate for Microsoft.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Wonderful to have you. We've got Eric Sims from StackBlitz.
What's going on? Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And last but not least, jumping in and out and giving us every favorite camera view possible, David East, Developer Advocate at Google.
You had the rhyme there. You said last but not least. We have
David East.
And I was like, here we go. He thought of it, and then the cadence fell off. And I was like, you had it. Dunk. It's okay. Well, plenty of opportunities for more rhymes later.
All right. I was so busy focused on the double camera angle and the in and out. I missed it. I missed that one. So some of the things. So this is just a casual roundtable conversation, right? We want to sort of emulate that feeling that we get when a few of us come out of a conference talk and we're standing in the hallway and we get a cup of coffee and we run into Lee or Eric or Chris and we're like, hey, you're in services, blah, 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 blah. So really anything's on the table for the community, things that help people out, trends, anything that you want to talk about that you see that is really sort of interesting. Groups or collections of services that are coming out. Speaking of hiring, right? There's low code and no code solutions are sort of popping up. And like, as developers, maybe how do we augment the idea of building the tools so that we can exponentially let low code or no code people sort of make the rest of, get us across the finish line, right? I've heard the term like the last yard of development or the last mile of development, where we sort of build everything out and then let everybody else in the company sort of take it that last little bit. I really like that phrase. The try before you buy, like how do you get the boss to pay for it, right? We don't have credit cards as developers. And if we did, it would be a very different world. But like we need to show and demo these things to our boss and get their buy-in so they pull out their credit card, right? Because we want to use these things. And so like, how do you balance that with the ability to like make something useful and offer a commercial product? So, and then we'll get into like everyone, I want to talk about the wish list and what you see in 5 years and what you saw from 2020 and that sort of stuff. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to stop screen sharing so we get everybody back on camera. And let's start with you, Eric. You popped in first and had what do you see for 2020 as far as services? Did you see a big boon? Was it rocking, or was it just business as usual?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Definitely a rocket, right? Because because of the pandemic, I mean, software has never been more important. It's almost like a blessing, right? That the pandemic happened when the internet and the different services that support it are so robust. Can you imagine this happening in like 2000 with dial-up, right? Like, I think the world would have ground to a halt. But what ended up happening is like the infrastructure I think was in place, and so it was kind of crazy for us, the customers that came to our door for like our enterprise offering. We had everyone from Fortune 10 all the way to we have like grocery stores that have bought our offering to run on-prem because these guys are having to adapt to the climate. And so this grocery store did not have delivery, and now they're getting into the business delivery, which means they need software, right? So now they have to become a software company. So I mean, this has been a trend that's been kind of happening for a while, but this what happened in 2020 was very much an accelerant of that, right? So I think it's especially for the web, web software is how banks move billions, trillions of dollars per year. It's how people buy groceries now. It's kind of central to what we do, right? So I from our view, it's been huge, the shift that's happened.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The idea that 2 years ago, like a year and a half ago, the idea of online ordering and carry out was like hit or miss, right? You knew a couple restaurants in your area. DoorDash was sort of picking up steam, and now it's table stakes at this point. So Chris, have you seen? See, we already did it. Chris Noring, let's start with you. So how have you seen these small businesses, right, sort of scoop up services and sort of cobble them together to what did you see in 2020 that really like rang true to services? And like, was it a big boon? Did you see something similar to Eric?
I would say this, me being based in London, we have this big Deliveroo company that delivers food everywhere, right? I mean, I'm sure you have similar services in the US. What I saw was a scramble from every single restaurant, mom and pop store, and that you can imagine. Everyone just wanted to be on board a digital training because people could no longer go into stores, right? So everyone had to sign up. It was like a chicken chain like Nando's, for example. It was the Guide Michelin restaurant and so on. Everybody needed to change their MO of how do we get the food out there? And we need to be part of a chain, or we need to create it. So I definitely saw that, food that you couldn't even imagine would be available for you on your mobile app was suddenly available everywhere, and I think people needed to change fast for their own survival. So it just felt like the year when everything went all in digital.
Yeah, I agree. James, I enjoy the dog has joined us. My dog or cat may wander through here as well. It's my favorite part about online meetings now is dogs and cats and kids. Mm-hmm. And, people have really welcomed everyone into their homes in a level that is unprecedented. What is your take on 2020 and services? We talk about the small players coming on board in mass panic, mass desire, right? Like mm-hmm. live or die sort of situations. Did you have similar takes or something different?
In the commerce space, any company that sells a good service or otherwise that wasn't online had a mad dash to get there as soon as they possibly could to keep their business running. The flip side of that is that companies that were secure in their online offering, I think, pulled back a little bit and said, we're not going to re-platform or invest heavily on pushing the boundaries this year. Instead, we're going to, kind of shore up what we already have in place. And maybe that was a bit of risk aversion due to the pandemic, or maybe it was just that all those companies that weren't there were sucking up all the resources and talent trying to get online, and it didn't leave much left for anyone else. So yeah, there was definitely a mad dash to get online, but maybe less so on pushing the boundaries and innovating for those that were already there.
That's really interesting. Services and groups like us are essentially a finite resource, right? So like we only stretch so far with like resources and help and guides and tutorials and people to do the work, right? Lee, how did you stretch services to meet that demand? Like, how do you meet that demand? There wasn't enough of us to go around. So like, what happened? Did people get left out?
Yeah, I have an interesting perspective on this throughout 2020, because at the start of 2020, I was working for a regional grocer who was think like a 90-year-old brick and mortar grocery company that had been making this digital transformation to online. They're called Hy-Vee. They're primarily focused in the Midwest United States. And when the pandemic happened in the United States, I mean, immediately we saw 10x all-time high traffic. It was just insane. And I was working on e-commerce specifically for ordering groceries online, which was one of the most important things at that time to help senior citizens and people get their groceries. And it was really interesting from a technology perspective for me to see how maybe some of the past infrastructure decisions we made and how we were hosting or how we were building applications somewhat crumbled under that scale, and how we had to re-architect things and come up with solutions on the fly to meet that demand. So it was a really fun engineering problem to solve, and also very gratifying to help those people who needed that. And then I guess the interesting inverse to that too is then as I moved into my job at Vercel, it was more so on, two primary sectors that we serve as ad back media and e-commerce. So helping empower those businesses to get online that others were kind of touching on, getting them online so that they can sell, they can give their items to their customers, and helping out with that transition was also really interesting to see too. So, yeah.
Wow. Right. So that's fantastic. So right in the thick of it, from what were was it the infrastructure as far as metal servers and just distribution of applications? Was it monolith? Was it getting bug fixes out and having to deploy during high traffic times? What were, you don't have to give us the war stories. If I'm sure you've got the scars to prove it.
Everything you can imagine. Definitely serverful. Just the woes of getting 10x traffic and having to scale that, and where you find where the cracks are in your infrastructure. I guess we were in the process of, multi-year process of moving things from a more monolithic approach to, we were using GraphQL and microservices, and because we were building for a mobile and web solution, and it basically just expedited that process quite a bit. We had to really invest in making sure that it was a scalable solution and it worked for all the demand that we were trying to face. So definitely moving to more microservices, handling that scale, and a lot more focus too on mobile, I would say, especially we were building a React Native app, and it was getting a lot of usage. So we had to work with that as well.
That's fantastic. So David, you've heard sort of some of our takes on 2020 and sort of the bolster. What did you see happen to services, bundling or specific services like mobile just sort of explode last year? And how did that sort of wave or tsunami of influx? How did you see that? How did you guys handle that?
So I've been working on Firebase, I guess, as of in April. It will be for 7 years, and so I've seen it since it was I was the 15th, 16th employee there, and we were really small, and then now saw the stuff skyrocket. So the funny thing was, in terms of people being onboarded or people using the service and going through the service, I felt like it was a normal amount was still happening. But the thing that really took me back was just the sheer amount of people that were actually coming on board. So Firebase built to scale. So when we were onboarding more traffic and more everything, that was not a huge problem, but a huge problem that we saw was just the sheer amount of people learning. So our case support just went crazy because the amount of people who are I'm going to learn how to code now that I'm stuck at home, or I'm going to start up this business idea now that I have all this time. And that was the amount of stories and things that we saw come out of that was really interesting. And just all the ideas that people had that now they're I have the time to do this. I'm going to just build this and make it happen. And it was pretty amazing to see just someone being I need a real-time database for some like crazy idea, or I'm just trying to put a delivery tracker into our into this new app we're building now because we didn't have that before. We need to be able to see the stuff update in real time. So just lots and lots of people just learning how to just trying to be like, how do I copy the code from your site and put it into my app, and then it works, and then I'm happy because it works. So it was a lot of that, and that's like a very good way of programming, in my opinion.
Yeah. First, congrats for 7 years at Firebase. I don't.
Almost. You can't congrats me yet. It's close, but it's not there. You don't congrats someone before it happens, especially not in 2021. You
never say it out loud.
That's we'll see you. I will talk to you in April. We'll see.
In April, we'll have a party.
Yeah.
Man, that is an eternity in time. So the documentation and the onboarding, I think, is something very centerpiece to this conversation of services, right? You could have the world's best pipelines, data, and code, but if nobody knows how to onboard and come through them, like your funnel is going to just be abysmal. Chris, one of the things I want to ask you with DigitalOcean, I have read their docs and their services and their their articles and the education stuff coming out of them for, God, I don't know, 20 years now, if they've been around that long. Like, I feel like it's something that I've always sort of been like, oh, there's always something on digital, for like curating my own Linux boxes or, geeking out real hardcore. How was the onboarding process for you? Did you see or experience any of that sort of like people coming in and just wanting to serve themselves and getting those code snippets up and sort of pasting that thing together? What was your experience in 2020?
Yeah, I think that sort of learning experience is going to be the same. Like, definitely there's more people doing it now, but that learning experience is the same. Like, when I started, 7 years ago doing Linux boxes, it was very much the process of copying, pasting. Oh, I messed that server up pretty bad, so let me destroy and rebuild. So you see that.
Everybody's just nodding and like, oh yes, the number of VMs I have killed is extraordinary. This
SSL is littered with get out of here.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that, I don't know, that onboarding process is still very much the same, but what you see lately is more people moving towards that platform as a service sort of thing, where it's like, hey, you don't have to do your SSL cert. Let us do it for you. And I, for one, can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I think a couple years ago was the last time I had to set up Let's Encrypt for the last time that regenerated every 90 days. And I haven't had to do it since. And you know what? I don't miss it one bit.
And Let's Encrypt was like a massive step forward. So like, just thinking about like Let's Encrypt is great, but like going back before that and SSL cert, oh my gosh. No, thank you.
I worked at a company. We had like 6 sort of like stacked certs that had to be on .NET servers in a specific order, in a specific chain, in a specific, and like every couple of years they would come up and all shit. Like, it was just a week from hell. It was a terrible time to be in development. So services as a platform, Chris started to allude to. So it used to be sort of like you would sign up for a service and you would do one thing here and you would do one thing here and you would host your application here. And now we've sort of got this, a lot of us here work for a platform that is constantly offering more and more ability to sort of scale out and do things. Like I know Vercel has analytics and Firebase has a real-time database, and they're rolled up into the Google with OAuth and analytics as well. And DigitalOcean started with VMs, and now they have services and serverless and stuff like that. From the group, what I really want to know is like, where do you see services going? Like, I see like this a la carte thing that is really sort of like, everyone's sort of offering a lot of the same things with different things that work in a way together with their own services. Now I'm just spinning around in circles. What do you see as sort of like the popular services, or the ones that people put together the most, right? So you've got auth, you've got e-commerce, you've got analytics, but like, if you had to pick 3 and only 3 to sort of like zip together as a bundle, sort of what would you pick as a sort of like must have, like table stakes? Lee, I see your brain sort of moving. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's important to make a distinction between popularity and usage, because I think that what probably seems popular in our bubbles or in what we enjoy using or new things that we're trying out probably is a different indicator of what people are actually using in the wild. It's probably the more adopted solutions that have been around for a while. So the older companies, the Herokus, the Firebases, the DigitalOceans, right, that have been out there adopted, and even like the more legacy, or not even legacy, but like the older technologies like MySQL, right? You're going to see a heck of a lot more of that in the wild than, probably some type of newer database structure.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that. I try and remember, that like I, as a developer, want certain things, but am I the main customer of these platforms, or am I just sort of a conduit for the actual customer? Like, who's the main customer of these platforms, developers or the business? What do you think?
I mean, ultimately, the business is the one signing the check. So unless you can translate that developer productivity or user experience or performance back to some overarching business goal of what you're trying to accomplish, whether that's gaining more users or having faster page speed so that you can rank higher on Google, or all those things, they have to funnel back to some metric. And if you can show that improvement, then you can basically justify whatever technical solution helps you achieve that outcome. So I like to decouple the outcome piece from the solution piece.
Yeah, that's a good point. So before we all jumped in, we were talking about empowering developers to sort of get into the tool set and sort of build demos or solutions to pitch to their own bosses internally. Most of us, I always think of the Twilio with, it's like, give the developer the length and the rope to sell your product for you. So how do you square those two things away? If the company is the customer and the developer is your sort of entryway in, how do you how do you tease that line? Is it two sides of the same coin? Is it a fine line to walk? Like, can you serve both with the same sort of offerings? Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, you're actually describing what I got my butt schooled in 2020, is how to like, because you're talking about a bottom up sales motion, right? So you're talking about engineers who like come to your service where like, I need this, right? And they don't have budget power 99% of the time. They can't, if they do have budget power, it's for like $100, which is usually not going to be what you're shooting for, especially if you're targeting an enterprise account, right? You probably want $100,000 right out of that deal. So, and the problem is that the people, the engineers who need this often have never had to go through the process of how do you kind of run that up the flagpole and describe the value proposition for the business, right? Of what does it mean for like at StackBlitz? What does it mean to have an instant IDE, right? How much is it? How much is the developer's salary, and how much time are we saving them, right? And then we literally have a formula, right, where we say this is, these are pretty reasonable numbers, and we're charging you like 1/5 or 1/10 of the price, right, of what you're going to see across your organization. And then there's kind of like, and you have to fit in with the the objectives of like the people who actually do have budget authority, right? So to kind of break it down, it's like, talk to engineer, great, they need this thing. You say, awesome, who's your manager? If they have budget authority, you talk to them, you say, what are the objectives that the company top down is trying to do? How do we position what we do to kind of better drive that, right? And then how do we kind of make a very tangible, convincing pitch of like, this is actually going to accelerate innovation, save you money, and make you more competitive against the other people in the market, right? But it's kind of you kind of have different phases of that, where to have mission success, to actually go and get the budget procured for it. But yeah, it's incredibly interesting though. Like this is, I'd never done any of this stuff before. In this past year, we've learned a ton, and we have a lot more to learn, I'm sure. But it's actually really rewarding, to be able to, to help that person who comes to you and says, I need your help, right? Like, I need your help. I need this thing super bad so I can do my job better, right? It's actually our job to help them navigate the crazy internal, structure of the company and politics and whatever, so that they can succeed, right? So it's, even though we're a technology company, there's actually a lot of human navigation that's required to ultimately help them be successful technically,
Yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding. What are some of your other guys' experience with that sort of ground up developer experience? I know personally, like, I have left companies because I've been like, I need this thing. I got this thing working, and then I give it to my boss, and they go, no. And it's like, well, but you wanted this, and I built it, and I gave it to you, and that sort of block just kept happening. So like, how do you guys empower or work with developers from the ground? Like, how does that ground up work? Like, so I sign up for the service, I get the generated email, and then I go through the docs, I start to serve myself. Like, how does that work?
I mean, from our side, it all starts like from the very, very beginning. Like I'm been a developer advocate for a long time for Firebase, and like developer advocate's like a really, it's just like a very odd position. Like I love it. I love my job. Fortunately I haven't had to be around people for, a very long time now, but I never always like explaining my job to people at places, because they would be like, what do you do? And I always felt like the guy from Office Space who was like, I'm the people person. The engineers can't talk to the customers, so I do.
So you physically take it from there to the engineers?
Yeah, that's Twitter.
No, my assistant does that.
So like, but what we've always done from day one when we're building something new. So like, actually my very first project on Firebase was helping build Firebase hosting, and at least getting it across the finish line. And that was really amazing to watch the last part of that happen. I thought when I joined, I was like, I'm gonna join this startup. I'm gonna be writing all this code, and I'm gonna be like doing all I moved to San Francisco. I'm doing all the hacking with in the SF town. That's what they like when you call it when you're there. And then they were like, you're going to be in UX studies all day. And I was just watching people just completely struggle to use the product. And I've done that for like 7 years, or almost 7 years, hopefully 7 years. If it's not 7 years, I'm coming after you.
Knock on wood.
But yeah, knock on wood. But so I just watch people in UX studies and you can't actually tell them what they're doing wrong. They could be overlooking just like a button. And then you're like, I should not have called it that name. It should have been called this name. And they would have clicked it, or they would have like, that step ordering makes no sense for setting that up. Why did I include that one there? And you can't say anything. So you just write it down, and you just hurt as it goes really wrong. And then you empathize for the person, because then they're like, I'm doing this wrong. And you're like, you're not, I did it wrong, and now I just subjected you to it. And so you learn so much through that, and I've been doing that for so long, for really big products that we've released, and even really small libraries. I've had people go through it because it's just such a great sanity check. And then we also for big products, we onboard partners very early. We identify people maybe from other partnerships that have a need for something. And then we say hey, you want to try this out for us, validate that it works well, that it fits your use case. And then that gives us so much insight into what's going on, because usually when you have an early partner, you're helping them out a lot, and they're just giving you complete unfiltered feedback into what they like and don't like. And so that's sort of and that, what you hope does, is organically creates this process of which when another company or another developer or team goes to evaluate your product, they're like, that seems like the thing we need, or that feels like that solves a problem we've encountered before. So that's sort of been our take on it. It's just working very tightly with people. Yeah.
Chris Norton, I see you nodding a lot. Is that sort of in the same vein of experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a service that I was part of, Static Web Apps, one of these Jamstack, deployment things. And, as I wasn't part of the engineering team, but as a advocate, I had the opportunity to work closer to the users. And one of the first people that was encountered was the MVPs and also ourselves, right? I mean, when it comes to these kind of services, we are part of it as advocates because we love to use it. So we dog food our own stuff, right? We use our own services, we write the docs, and then we bring in other, could be partners, could be MVPs and so on. And they have a stab at it, and they have a feel, and they come back to us with very honest opinions. I mean, I think it's important to realize it's work that you do before the service is launched, but also, during as well, because I mean, it never stops, right? So I think it's also important to be there on GitHub and raise the issues and help triage the issues that arise, and also to keep an ear on the ground, be in Facebook groups or various other user communities, and just listen to what are the pains of using this. Have you used this? If you did, what are you missing, and so on. So it's a very continuous effort, and I'm not on one team like David is, but it's still, I tend to pick I tend to do a pickings of different services that I really feel like matches my technical profile, and I kind of go from there. So I try to be the person that kind of dog foods a number of services, a number of documentation. So if I feel something, I think that the user will feel that too, and then I try to validate that is actually the case. So
how do you, when you're sort of dog fooding these internal services, how do you keep yourself from getting too close to the product? I've been in situations where like I'm building a thing for a customer, and I work on it for a couple of weeks, and then I give it to them, and they take a left turn immediately, and because I like hop through the steps over and over dozens and dozens of times every hour, every day, I seem to sort of miss the bigger picture very, very quickly. James, I see you nodding. Like how do you build a product for a customer and have the sort of space to look at it as both developer and customer without getting too close? Or is it because you have those people grooming through it? Is that sort of the secret, is to have someone else give you that golden feedback?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in and say that feedback is essential. When you work directly for a company, it's very hard not to get too close. And maybe that means that you look at your product, with some red glasses on, saying everything's perfect about it, or maybe you get too close and you say everything's broken because you're constantly fixing the bugs. And both is the wrong mindset. You need to level set and talk to the people that are actually using your product, talk to external developers, and build up a good structure of partners that you can really work with to get that objective feedback. And just talking to them regularly, I think helps you get a bit of perspective, so you can take that step back and see it with clearer eyes.
Yeah, Christabel, do you have when you guys are like rolling out products and sort of bundling things together, do you have that sort of alpha beta experience, or with partners? Like, how do you, as a DevRel, how do you sort of like balance those developer needs versus business requirements and the human part that kind of sticks in the middle?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's very hard to validate something unless you have that real person on the other side, right? And I hate doing it, but the UX tests and where you like have people walk through and they talk about how bad your design is, hate doing it, but they help so much. Yeah, and I think the process is really just about getting people involved at every stage, and increasing the number of people involved, and just trying to get validation as quickly as possible, whether that's good validation or bad validation. One of my favorite stories is Buffer. When they first started, they had like their landing page and they said what we do, and it was like nothing but a static site, had no functionality, and there's a little button that said like buy now. So if you clicked buy now, it would say, hey, we're not ready to take money yet, but thanks for saying you like the idea. Could we have your email so we can email you later? And that sort of mentality, I think constant validation is the move.
That's really interesting. I don't know that I've ever, like, in the graveyard that is side projects, I don't know that I've ever started as simple as that, right? I've always been like, let me grab all these new technologies from all these things and sort of try to cobble together some sort of master Frankenstein over the weekend that inevitably just dies a sad, lonely death. But static page with a buy button, could be the the next big product. So we're working with developers. Beyond the platform itself, what are the tool sets? We've talked a little bit about docs and interactivity. Like, what are the tool sets that help this relationship that we've sort of talked about from dev to business? We've got developer CLI tools, we've got, the dashboards and the GUIs. Like, what sort of pieces really sort of help you guys make this platform work, right? That make people come in and say, like, this is a place that the developer can use, that you can like show value to the business, right? That like what tools do you guys take to make these things sort of manifest? Because I'm sure you're not on the phone all day with them. So like when they come to the site, like what things do you guys have or start to iterate on to really help this?
So maybe I can take a crack at that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned tools already, but I think it's important to establish that tools are many things. So for example, there could be a CLI, but it could also be integrated in your IDE, could also be snippets. So I think it's important that we give the experience to the developer that they don't actually have to leave their IDE. I mean, I personally feel that like the moment they need to leave for a portal and start clicking around, we have failed. I think it's very important that the developer feel like I'm only here, I'm being productive, I'm not being led the other way. You mentioned something earlier that I just wanted to respond to, and how do we cater to both developers and the business? And I think it's important that we offer different kind of free to try, and it's the actual product, it's not a diminished version. And if they want an SLA, if they want more capacity for whatever reason, I think it's important that is part of the pipeline as well. So I mean, when we launch services, we launch them in preview, right? Everyone can try it. We have a set of features that's always free. Once we go to production, or GA as we call it, there's an SLA. There's a promise of more enterprisey features. So I think it's important as part of the developer journey as well as the business journey that, on the one hand, we care a lot about DX. On the other hand, the business needs to understand what is the cost of this. What can I get when it gets big? So I just want to approach from those angles.
Yeah, that is a fantastic point. Tools are, I talk about tools, and I think quickly comes to mind the things that I use, but really the whole breadth of tools, GUIs, charts, even CSVs that have the data and the reporting that I don't ever want to see or don't ever want to look at, but that's valuable tooling to somebody to make those numbers come up and make sure that the business is going well. Eric, what about you? What sort of tooling do you guys have? You talked about this grassroots things. Are there things that you wish you had or needed to have or used, really leveraged this last year that you were like, oh, I'm so glad this hammer was the best hammer I ever, I'm so glad we made this hammer.
Yeah, we've we got a lot of work to do on this front. I think the thing, I guess, like there's like this concept of like product-led growth, right? And I think that's like StackBlitz is like a brutalist example of that, where there are like 2 other pages on our site besides the actual StackBlitz editor, right? And that's kind of an intentional thing where we focus our energy is entirely on the experience of getting into the product, right? Like when the metric that we use is like how fast from when you click a StackBlitz link is it booted inside of your browser, right? Like that's the entire value proposition of our product, right? But because of that, it's allowed our product to be shared widely. It's used by like 3 million developers a month now, right? And so like that's where all these companies that come inbound, the engineers are running across StackBlitz in the public market on documentation or bug repros, or they're using it to prototype. And so we've never really invested in the marketing pages of our site, largely because we've just funneled that all into just getting people into the product, right? Like even on our homepage, it's like the first thing that we have people do is like, start a project, right? Because that's it's way more illustrative. If like a picture's worth 1,000 words, like a live product in your hands without having to log in to use it is like 1 million or something, right? So that's like at the kind of at the core. That said, like we have a lot of work to do. Like we're actually going to be completely refreshing our entire site with marketing materials, right? Because we're now getting to a point where, in order to make it easier to have conversations about what is the value proposition, if the folks who are contacting us can send stackblitz.com/enterprise to their boss, right, that actually kind of lays this stuff out, it makes it a lot easier for them to, like we needed, that's our, again, it comes back to what's our job. It's to help the people who need this product to like pass it up the chain in a way that they don't have to actually do work. They just send a link or send a PDF, and their boss or whatever gets it, like, oh yeah, this makes sense, right? So I don't know if that's a direct answer to kind of what you were asking for, but that's kind of where we're at in the process, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, the only thing better than staying in the IDE, like Chris said, is a playground to jump into, that it's interactively on the web, that I can pull up and show a demo to a dozen people, or I can just run over to your desk and be like, you should check this out, this is amazing. And it just sort of like virally sort of takes over the office, and you can watch it in just a matter of minutes. People are on there jumping around, playing in the web, and so it's that frictionless experience of getting people in. And if that's the only page you have, right, they'll get in there and they'll play around with it. The GraphQL sort of playground.
David specifically like hooked us up with Firebase. To this day, we have a demo with Firebase that we do that is like it's like this real-time demo where you can in real time be opening a page and do hot reloading and debugging. And David, we are still using that. Thank you so much for hooking us up with that stuff. But like Firebase makes like demos like this in the world of remote work, right? If you can have something that's real time where they can, the user can have their phone in their hands and you're seeing something happening live, right? It makes a huge difference as far as like, translating like the value to not just the engineers, but also to the, the people kind of up the chain. So highly recommend Firebase, and figuring out clever ways you can use it to like enhance, your kind of the way in which you're describing your product interactively.
I remember that demo. You demoed that at NGConf, and I was sitting in the crowd, and that was great performance. But I just remember like everyone, because everything was all updating, and everyone was like, everyone had their phones out. It was like the closest thing you get to like an in-talk conference. Everyone had their phones up. It was really good. I think you can check it on YouTube. It was one of my favorite talks to ever be in person for.
Thanks, man. Well, yeah, I mean,
NGConf last year.
No, this like that one was like
2018?
Yeah, 20.
Okay.
Yeah, a while ago, but it was super good. StackBlitz is always fun to see demoed live because it's just so fast, so good for just real time feedback for programming. So yeah, I had my 8-year-old son built his first web app in StackBlitz.
What?
Yeah, just like 2 days ago.
Man. That's so awesome.
It was all fun until we started working with tables, and he didn't want to do it anymore. It's actually a true story.
I think I burned out once or twice on tables too, to be fair.
He was like, this doesn't make any sense.
He's so young and so wise. That actually leads us into one topic moving into the future of services, is this idea of real time. Of getting right that remote instant gratification of like, we talked about delivery tracking, right, and getting that stuff in there. A couple years ago, even last year, this might have just been sort of nice to haves and a stretch goal, but nobody ever expected you to like get real time tracking in your grocery store app. And now it's like we need it, and we need it yesterday. So like, if you see real time as a product that's going to push the next couple of years, I'd like to hear your sort of thoughts on that and where that might be going. Or if you think like, we're all going to be living in a Bitcoin mining world, living under a dam somewhere, let me know about that. But like, is it real time? Is it something else that's going to really push this envelope for the next couple of years in services? What do you guys think? So your customers on platform and they're building stuff and we're doing really good, but is it real time, or is it like deeper analytics, or is it like CDN, edge computing? Is it less data? Like, where do you guys see the world sort of the desire? Not me, because as a developer, I don't have, but your customers, the actual customers, like what do you see them wanting?
I think there's a word that I really liked that we've said so far. I liked it so much I went to go look for domains for it. But the word is frictionless, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that Chris Noring said of, hey, you're in your editor, we want it to be frictionless. Don't leave. StackBlitz's entire prop value is it's frictionless. You can build it, design it, share it, all that good stuff. So the idea that I think it's more than just real time. I think it's the ability for, I don't know, info to, if you talk about 10 years, info just downloaded straight to our brains probably, but which is the ultimate real time. But yeah, frictionless, I think is the word.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that's frictionless data consumption or frictionless development or frictionless? What do you think, David? You were about to respond.
I wholly agree with what Chris said, because I've been doing real time with Firebase now. It's been that was the thing that Firebase was known for when it was getting its feet out from underneath it. So for you saying the people starting to move to that, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's all I've been doing for a long time now. If anything, it's we've actually worked a lot on being a lot of people are well, I don't need real time. How do I not do things in real time? And sometimes we're well, we never really thought about that. We're you don't want it right away? And they're no, I don't really need it right away. And we're you sure about that? And so we've actually an example of this is in the real-time database, the original Firebase SDK. There's no up until a couple of years ago, but for many years, there's no easy way to just get the data one time. And so we had to introduce this one method for it. And then it was not as good. All it did was start a real-time stream, get the data and close it. Cause we're okay, that's how we built it. And so it took us a while to actually go back and be okay, let's just actually build this for actual one-time gets, which is the simple thing, but we didn't even have the functionality in the SDK. But that's the thing is I think that what Chris talked about with frictionless is it needs to be really easy, because it's not just streaming the data in real time or just getting the data. It's how easy was it setting up your database? How did it get provisioned? How fast was it to connect to it, to start working in it, whether you're in your app, in a browser, or just in a command line environment? In the early Firebase days, the two co-founders were really big about 5-minute get started. Everything we did had to basically okay, could you understand that in 5 minutes? Could you get going on that in 5 minutes? And even in our talks and stuff, I once gave a presentation before a rehearsal, and I remember they were you don't show a real-time update for 8 minutes. And they're what are you doing? It's got to be a first 30 seconds. You got to get the real time in there immediately. That's the magic part. And so, yeah, it's always about if there's this big gap in between what it takes to get something built, a lot of times it just gets to the point where you're I'm not going to do that. You're already trying to get someone to learn something new or embrace something new, and it's really hard to want to learn something new, and you might have that motivation too, but if something breaks on you, you're then the trust starts going down, the difficulty in your mind increases. So you really got to make those first 5 minutes feel great, and then after that, someone sees the payoff of why they'd use your service.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying there, David, because I wholly agree. I think it's important that we have an environment. I want to answer this question from the developer standpoint, but also what I think the business wants. From a developer standpoint, I think it's super important that we need to realize that developers lose so much time on debugging, and having a local runtime is a thing that I hope is going to be the standard for the next coming years. Every single cloud service or whatever service out there should have a runtime, and there should be no surprises. I mean, developers have come to get used to containers, right? Take that container on your computer, deploy it on the cloud, no difference, just a connection string. I want the same for developers, regardless of whatever service they're using in the cloud. There should be no difference. And I think there needs to be a lot of invention, tool-wise to make that possible. But I hope a lot of companies understand how much time that developers are losing on debugging, and that nasty surprise, though, will it actually work on prod?
Yes. Yes. So actually this was a huge pain point coming from a small startup who was our cloud service must be robust and must like scale and serve all these customers. And then and you're like, and it must be cloudy and very powerful in the cloud, which is true and is good. But then when you deal with a lot of customers, they're like, well, how do I test against this? And then when you're small and you haven't created like an on-prem or like just even like a local installation of it, you're like, well, you just create another project and then you test against that one. And then they're like, it's the same thing. It's just network connected. And I've written tons of open source libraries where I've done stuff like that, and it's not great. And so we invested heavily in a whole emulator service because that was like one of the number one pieces of feedback we heard. Like, please let me do my testing like locally. I shouldn't need a network connection to do that. And so, yeah, that's something that was near and dear to my heart and was like a multi-year long project that we, have been able to see a lot of benefit from. Like the increased use of Firebase emulators is just like, it's like as soon as someone uses it and gets the new behavior of like, oh, I'll stop using a cloud connected project for development and I'll use an emulator, they don't go back. It's just like instant, like they get it. They're like, oh, yep, this is 1,000 times better. Not doing that. I'm connecting when I need to connect and deploy, local when I'm local. And it's pretty amazing seeing that behavior just continuously grow.
Yeah, Lee, Vercel has something similar to Dev. They have dev envs. I stumbled across this, and I may not be totally grokking it right, but like I was able to run like all my environment variables locally, and then they were just there when I pushed my code up, and I didn't have to like. I've gone through this. I don't know how many you guys probably too. Copy and pasting my env to this secure GUI, and like I did a couple things, and I was like, oh, they're already there. And I was like, half a day done. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go do something else now because that's all done.
Yeah, I think.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. When we think back to like the origin of Vercel, previously when it was Zeit, the focus has always been on trying to give a great command line interface along with the existing product. And I know for me specifically, when I tried out the product for the first time, I was like using the command line to push a production build and just deploy it, alias it to some domain, and I was just done. And it happened in 30 seconds to a minute, and that blew my mind. And then what I realized as the product has evolved a little bit, but what you're talking about, let's say I want to use some serverless functions. I want to improve upon that local development experience. So what the command line allows you to do with Vercel, you can run Vercel dev and simulate interfacing with those serverless functions locally when they're in like an API folder or part of a Next.js project. So you can basically not have to stand up a whole separate project for that, but simulate what the environment looks like when it would actually be deployed. So you have that. And then you also have what you mentioned, which is the concept of different environments just built in by default, where you have your local development, you have your preview environment, and then your production environment. And you can manage those environment variables or secrets through the command line and just push them up from there.
Yeah, it goes a long ways just to have sort of some scaffolding there to like sort of like just tell me where to put these sort of buckets and just let me like this Git branch goes here and this Git branch goes here, and like I don't have to worry about like. And
to your point of scaffolding too, the number one way that people, I think, there's the number one and two ways that people even get into that ecosystem for us is through MPX Create Next App, where they just use that to bootstrap a new project, and then you can throw a example param on there and use one of 200 examples. So it's like, boom, I'm in the system, command line, push it to production. Or you just do it all through the GUI if you're more inspired to do it in the browser.
Nice. James, do you see the sort of same tools and services in e-commerce specifically with like real time or with the dev tools sort of experience?
Yeah, we're a very developer-focused company, so we're kind of in that market already, focusing on dev tools, APIs, CLIs. It does create a disconnect when we're talking to programmers that like to dive in and start building right away versus business that wants to look at the UI, and we're like, hey, we're headless. We don't have a UI. Sorry. But yeah, as
that's fine. Just show it to me then.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't have anything to show you.
And as I look forward, I see this idea of APIs and building blocks continuing. As we go on with tech, I've been doing it for decades, the layers of abstractions just continue to add on. We talked about doing our SSL certs in the beginning, and now you don't have to because it's abstracted away. And I see that continuing both on the platform side, but also on our software side, that people expect things to be interoperable, work together easily, and that they can just grab a building block, whether it's a platform or a software as a service, and just plug it into their solution without building from scratch. I see that just continuing to build on top of each other, so that that layer of abstraction gets bigger and the building blocks get more complex, but we have to keep them simple and seamless for our clients.
Yeah, I really love this theme of frictionless, that has the local emulator and local development, and being able to do all of these things in immediate feedback, and then having the confidence to just commit and have a stable production environment sort of matching, right? So I've lost, I think, years of my life in sysadmin years ago trying to match stage and production, and fighting with developers about whose fault it was, because stage doesn't match production and production's broken, and who's at fault. And I think we've all been in those finger wars. And frankly, both of us were doing a really terrible job at the time, I'm sure, configuration and other things.
Yeah, it amazes me how quickly the enterprise went from, I have to own my own server, to what's this new serverless thing? We want to use that for everything. Like the transition was faster than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, even companies that are just like, you will pry this on-prem from my cold, dead hands. As soon as, and it's people like you guys that I think really sort of touted the value and figured out how to present that value to them, where it's like, look, your business lives up here. Like, you may be technology based, but you're spending so much money building this foundation, that there's foundations here. Build on top of that, stand on the shoulders and leverage. We're building really above the sort of primitives that you guys and everyone here has sort of put together and put all that work into, to build great products on top of. We're coming
on that. Just if I can interject really quick, I think
absolutely.
It's important to make a distinction though for companies who from the top down understand technology versus companies from the top down who maybe are in an old school way of thinking. Because those who understand technology from the top, I think it's much easier to convince them, especially people in security or networking, IT, other parts of the business. It's easier to convince them to do things in more modern ways. But for those with a older mindset, more longer established companies, you really have to solidify that business value with some actual driving goal. And usually that conversation only happens when it's like, we're doing a replatforming, or we're doing a multi-year project to improve performance, or there was some event that happened that caused that transition. They're not necessarily just like, what's that new hot service that I want to use?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think for those established businesses looking down, that they have a mind frame of owning intellectual property or owning the value stream, and that value stream is shifted, right? It's no longer the stuff inside your building that you're creating, but the stuff you build on top of that to that service product, right? So I think they come from a good place, right? They're just the value has shifted underneath them, and they may not have. They're busy running a business, right? They may not have, they don't have all day to spend on a show waxing bleeding edge technologies, so they may not get that. So I think you guys are doing a really great job of sort of gently explaining that to them when you get that sort of opening to talk about replatforming or faster metrics or whatever might have started that conversation. So that's about all the time we have for today on the Modern Web. I want to go around and give everyone a chance to sort of promote anything you want, talk about the latest, coolest thing. Maybe you watched the Mandalorian series and you thought I should watch it again, like me. Or something in technology or your company base or whatever you want to sort of promote or wax on or anything like that. So Lee, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I can just quickly talk about a short summary of what Vercel is going to be looking at, Next.js is going to be looking at maybe for 2021, or just kind of at a high level, some things I find interesting. So, Vercel is, if you haven't gathered kind of what I've been talking about, but it's just a really quick way to deploy the front end of your application or serverless functions. And it basically is a platform to enable collaboration by giving the developers these collaborative features and tools to build high performance websites, basically. So as far as Next.js, what the team is working on right now, which Next.js is a framework for building React applications. What the team is working on right now is really a lot of performance improvements, like adopting Webpack 5, which will decrease build times, and decreasing the install size and the number of dependencies in the framework. So I think we're at like 58% smaller install size now in the latest Canary and 56 less dependencies. So that actually turns out to make a huge impact on all the people's CI systems who are installing Next every time, or people who are downloading it on slow internet, or, you know, trying to reduce the fatigue of a node modules folder by, you know, inlining some of those packages and removing as many dependencies as we can, which is also good for security too. So that's like the current focus for Next.js. For Vercel, we're thinking a lot about how we turn developers on our platform into scientists. And really what we mean by that is you build your application, you preview those changes, you ship it to production. How do we then iterate on those changes, measure that impact, and look at things, performance metrics like core web vitals, and try to figure out what the real user impact is in the world, and then iterate on that by using metrics, whether it's A/B testing or other sorts of personalization, to determine the best content for our users. So we're thinking a lot about that. That's my spiel.
Oh yeah, I love the idea of just giving me those data sheets that I can show, like my 2 weeks side project of building this thing out in this way saved X amount of seconds per. Someone just give me that sheet so I don't have to flame graph it myself. That sounds fantastic. I love that idea. David, what about you? 6 years and change with Firebase, knock on wood.
Now you're getting it. Yeah, so we're right now in the middle of working on a project that I'm super excited about, that we're like doing like semi-publicly, mostly publicly. So if anyone is interested in it, you just DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open for better or for worse. And so just send me a message, and I would love to chat with people about it, especially if you are a web developer. But yeah, I'm super excited about that and everything we got coming up. So that's my spiel. It's not as fun. I feel like I can't go into a really good spiel after Lee, because then I would just be like, oh, well, I believe in that we do, because it was good. And so I would just be imitating him after that. So I got low key it now. And then the next person can do a high key spiel, because I'm just doing a favor. Yeah, exactly. So we're just working on stuff. It's good. It's exciting. Send me a message.
All right. Who wants to jump in with a high key spiel? Give me your best pitch.
All right, let's go. All right, so Stack Blitz. All right, so what are we doing? So a lot of our work has been in enterprise on-prem, so behind the firewall. It's awesome stuff. So again, instant live environment. If you want to try it, if you've never heard of it, stackblitz.com. Click React, Angular, whatever have you, and in live environment. It's incredibly fast. It's all in your browser. So for our new thing is like enterprise, right? So behind your firewall, it's great if you have like a design system at your company and you want to share components internally, accelerate learning. You can embed it in your docs. One awesome thing, right, is if you are managing a library for a gigantic company, often you'll have like 10 people that are supporting like thousands of engineers. So you get just, flooded with bug reports. So StackBlitz is great for, a lot of companies force them now to actually have a StackBlitz link so that they don't have to figure out, is this even a bug, right? And of course, just for like rapid prototyping and collaboration, StackBlitz is awesome. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you're interested in bringing it to your company, you can shoot me an email at eric@stackblitz.com or shoot me a DM on Twitter or whatever have you, and we'd love to chat. Hopefully that was that like a 10 or a 9 on energy? I tried to ramp it.
I loved it.
That was high. I give you a 9 and then a half point for the lights. So 9.5. I love it.
Come on, man. Daft Punk is dead though. As of yesterday. That's sad times. Anyways.
And it's a tough world out there. Who wants to follow that?
I mean, can we talk about WandaVision? That's the TV show that I've been into lately. Disney Plus.
That will melt your face off.
You did say I could talk about TV shows.
Was crazy. WandaVision's like, it's crazy stuff. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It'll melt your mind off.
Given the chance, I'll call out that Commerce Tools is helping to form the Mock Alliance, which is a consortium of software vendors trying to push technology forward. So I'll throw a link up for that. You can go check it out. I'll close it there.
Is the Mock Alliance like the Star Wars Alliance?
Yes, but cooler because it's software.
Yes, but cool.
Or less cool because it's software. Depends on your outlook.
That's very fair. All right, Christabel, let's go to you, and then we'll wrap up with Chris Noring.
Sure. I was hoping for the softball one, but yeah, I guess at DigitalOcean, I don't know. We echo a lot of what everybody here is doing, right? And that is frictionless. Frictionless.com coming soon.
Did you get the domain? Frictionless.dev?
No, it's not available. The only one available is frictionless.ss, and not as fun. But
quite
yeah, so we recently launched our platform as a service called App Platform, and it is a way to just throw together a backend service like Laravel or something, throw in a database, throw in a front end, and you have like a full stack app. So and really what it all is we just did a hackathon, and it's just fun to see people build stuff, right? Like I'm all about these developers creating whatever app they want and trying to build a business from it or whatever. So frictionless, and here to help you all do cool stuff.
And where can people reach out for you on Twitter to get your frictionless hot takes?
Yeah. So on Twitter, I am Chris__SEV, Sev.
Nice. All right, Chris Noring, take us home.
Right. So it was last year we launched this static web app service. We want to be able to deploy spa apps, Gatsby, you name it, anything Jamstack. And we wanted to throw in some serverless in there. We've seen a lot of uptick from people using that service. We're super excited about that fact. I think it's the fastest growing service on Azure. Don't take my money or my word on that. But what I wanted to say is that it's going to go global and global access, which means production ready in April. I hope so. And a colleague of mine is putting the last hands on a developer runtime, which I'm super excited about because me and David just talked about that, how important that is to have that emulator that works locally. So a month and a half, you'll be able to use static web apps, and it's going to, you have that guarantee that it's going to work in dev as well as in prod.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Yeah, man, I think we hit on the frictionless and the developer runtime and helping those developers show value add up the chain. I think it's really important to platforms, and I think we touched on some really good points here. I want to thank everyone in my panel for the time, for coming in. You all brought a Big Ten energy and ideas and contributed to the conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you to This.Labs for sponsoring. James, do you want to give us one more pitch?
No, just glad to be here, glad to sponsor, and this was a great panel of people. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, with that, we will see you again. Everyone stay safe. This is Modern Web Dev with Jesse Tomchak. Thanks for coming.